Hello class, I'm going to lecture on Chapter 1. In addition to Chapter 1, I'd like to give a very brief history of medicine. On this slide you'll see a timeline of medicine, and in no way do I expect you to memorize the dates for certain scientists and theorists that are listed here. I just like this timeline because it helps me to visualize which of these people were the prominent scientist or physician in each era. In this PowerPoint, I will highlight just a few of my favorites. I'd like to start first with Hippocrates and discuss a little bit about Hippocratic medicine. There's a medical book called the Hippocratic Corpus. It actually consists of about 60 or so textbooks within this book, and it is attributed to Hippocrates, but we know he did not write all of them. It was actually written over about 70 years by several individuals who were physicians at the time, and these works were collected in Alexandria and Egypt around 420 to 350 in an era known as the Before Common Era. Before the Hippocratic Corpus was written, diseases were believed to be caused by the gods when they released their wrath on the people. When the Hippocratic Corpus was written, it was a time when physicians believed that diseases were not caused by wraths of gods, but instead diseases were thought of as an imbalance of bodily fluids or humors. If there was a balance of the humors, this was called eucrasia. If there was an imbalance, then this was called dyscrasia. The physicians during this time of Hippocrates used systematic observation of the person who was ill. They tried to take a history from the patient, and a physical exam of the ill person became their primary focus during this time. Many medical and surgical treatments were introduced, and the word crisis was used to diagnose a critical time in the patient's illness. Either the disease caused death or the patient recovered. Man's four humors were identified as black bile, blood, yellow bile, and phlegm, all of which had to be in correct proportion to one another. Though virtually worthless as a theory, it remained the fundamental belief of European medicine for over 200 years. They correlated with the four elements proposed by Aristotle, and even with the four seasons. There are many different types of pictures you can find on the web that show the same information as the picture I show you here, but in slightly different formats. Feel free to find alternative pictures of the four humors, elements, seasons, behaviors, and body status, like hot, cold, moist, and dry. Basically, if a person had excess yellow bile, this was a problem with their liver and or gallbladder, and the person would present with skin that was hot and dry, and they were considered choleric. If a person had a problem with their blood, this was a problem with the heart, and the person would present with skin that was hot and moist, and they were deemed sanguine. A person who had a problem with their phlegm had a problem with the brain and lungs, and the person would be cold and moist. A person who had too much black bile had a problem with their intestines, and they would be cold and dry. Anytime a person had a humor that was out of balance, for example, if a person had excess yellow bile, then the physician would try to increase the opposite humor or reduce the one that was in excess. In this case, the humor opposite yellow bile is phlegm, so the person would be advised to eat fish and take cold baths. Another example would be if someone had excess yellow bile. The physician might prescribe an emetic to induce vomiting. If the person was melancholic, then black bile was to blame, and so they were given a laxative. In the person who had too much phlegm, they were cold and moist. In an effort to reduce this humor, the ill person was told to avoid fish because fish are associated with water. Additionally, they were told to bundle up and drink wine and eat pepper, so that they would sneeze and cough more to get out their phlegm. It is important to note that it was the Roman physician Galen that first described the four temperaments that correlated with the four humors, and their qualities of hot, cold, moist, and dry. He was revered as a great clinician. I will expand on the four temperaments on the next slide.